Once upon a time, in a kingdom shrouded in mist and shadows, there was a prince whose obsession with finding a true princess was whispered about in every corner of his court. His name was Prince Alaric, and he was no ordinary royal. From the moment he could walk, his every whim was indulged, every desire fulfilled. His court whispered of his strange quirks, his obsession with perfection, his hunger for control. But no one dared defy him, not even his own father, the king. His greatest fixation, however, was on finding a bride. But not just any bride, a real princess. It wasn't enough that she came from a noble lineage or carried herself with grace. No, Alaric needed to know she was flawless. A creature of purity so refined, her very presence could be felt through the slightest disturbance. His advisors trembled as he issued commands, searching far and wide for a princess who could pass his ultimate test. They called it the test of the pea. Long ago, when this kingdom was young, a prince sought a bride so perfect, so flawless, that he would know her by the smallest discomfort. He devised a test, a single pea placed beneath 20 mattresses to detect the sensitivity of a princess. What the people didn't know was that this test was rooted in dark magic. The pea was not just a symbol of nobility, it was an artifact of ancient power, meant to bind the most delicate of souls to the kingdom. Each princess who failed the test was consumed by the magic of the pea, leaving behind only her suffering. The test became tradition, but with each passing generation, the true purpose of the pea was forgotten, and only the curse remained. Prince Alaric paced the halls of his towering cold castle. His kingdom was vast, his power unquestioned, but his restless mind clung to one unshakable obsession: finding the perfect princess. The test of the pea had claimed many young women before, each one failing, each one proving to be less than perfect. But none had met his impossible standards. His father, the king, had grown weary of Alaric's endless search. "The kingdom grows impatient, son," the king warned. "It is time you take a bride." But Alaric was unmoved. His sharp gaze settled on the courtyard where the storm raged. "A true princess will endure," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. That very night, as the wind howled and rain slashed against the castle walls, the guards announced an unexpected visitor. A young woman, soaked to the bone, her face pale from exhaustion, stood at the gates. She introduced herself as Princess Elowen, a survivor of a kingdom far to the north, ravaged by war. She sought shelter, and with nothing but her noble title, she begged for refuge. Alaric's lips curled into a thin smile. "A title is enough, my lady," he said, echoing the same words he'd used many times before. Yet, as his eyes met hers, a strange unease settled over him. There was something different about her, something hidden beneath her quiet demeanor. As the storm raged on, Alaric led Elowen to a chamber at the highest point of the castle. In the center of the room stood a bed that stretched toward the ceiling. 20 mattresses piled high, each one softer than the last. Beneath them all, unseen and unnoticed, rested a single pea. "This bed is for you tonight," Alaric said, his voice soft but commanding. "I hope you sleep well, Princess Elowen." Elowen glanced at the towering bed, her eyes narrowing for the briefest moment, but she said nothing. With the help of the servants, she climbed to the top, her body already aching from days of travel. She laid herself down, her mind clouded by exhaustion. But the moment she closed her eyes, the discomfort began. It was a slight pressure at first, a tiny, unidentifiable pain deep in her bones. She shifted, hoping to find some comfort, but the pressure grew. It gnawed at her as though something was burrowing under her skin. The night stretched on, each hour a trial of endurance. By dawn, Elowen was trembling. She had not slept, but she did not cry out. When Alaric came to her chambers in the morning, he found her sitting by the window, her eyes hollow with exhaustion, but her back still straight. "How did you sleep?" he asked, though the glimmer in his eyes showed he already knew the answer. "There was something beneath me," Elowen replied, her voice flat. "I could not sleep." Alaric's smile grew, but there was something almost predatory in his gaze. "Ah, then you are truly a princess." Night after night, the test repeated itself. The pea, buried beneath layers of mattresses, seemed to grow more malicious with each passing evening. The pain was worse, the pressure heavier, as if the pea had taken on a life of its own. Elowen's body grew weaker, but she refused to let Alaric see her suffering. But it wasn't just the pea that tormented her. The castle itself seemed to conspire against her. The walls creaked and groaned, the cold air whispering through the halls, carrying voices, echoes of long-dead princesses who had failed the test. They whispered warnings, their voices filled with despair. "Elowen, leave while you still can," they seemed to say. But there was nowhere to go. The storm outside showed no sign of stopping, and Alaric watched her every move with cold calculation. Meanwhile, Alaric's obsession with Elowen grew. He had found her weakness, and he reveled in it. Each morning, he would come to her chambers, delighting in the sight of her growing frailty. Yet beneath his outward calm, something darker was brewing. His mind, once sharp, began to unravel. Alaric began to see things, shadows that moved at the edge of his vision, whispers that echoed in his ears, even when he was alone. The faces of the princesses he had tested before haunted him, their expressions twisted in agony, their hands clawing at the walls of his mind. He locked himself away in his chambers, poring over ancient texts and dark tomes, searching for the truth behind the test of the pea. What he found terrified him. The pea was no ordinary object. It was cursed, an artifact passed down through his family for generations. The test was never meant to determine purity. It was meant to bind the soul of a princess to the kingdom, to feed off her suffering, prolonging the royal line's power. The more delicate and sensitive the princess, the stronger the curse's hold. Elowen was not just enduring the test, she was being consumed by it. And so was Alaric. As the days passed, he became a shell of his former self. His skin grew pale, his eyes sunken and bloodshot. His paranoia deepened. He began to believe that Elowen was not just a victim. She was a threat. A dark power was growing within her, one that he could not control. Unbeknownst to Alaric, the curse was having a different effect on Elowen. With each night of torment, her strength grew. The pain no longer weakened her. It sharpened her senses, heightened her awareness. She began to see through the illusions of the castle, to hear the voices of the cursed princesses more clearly. They weren't warning her anymore. They were guiding her. By the seventh night, Elowen was no longer the fragile princess who had arrived at the castle. She had transformed. Her eyes, once soft and blue, had darkened, now glowing with an unnatural light. Her voice, once gentle, now held a commanding edge. When Alaric entered her chambers on that final morning, he found her standing at the foot of the bed, her pale lips curved into a smile. But it wasn't a smile of relief, it was a smile of triumph. "I have passed your test," Elowen said, her voice low and dangerous. Alaric, trembling, stepped back. You're not like the others." "No," she whispered, stepping closer. "I'm not. But you already knew that, didn't you? You thought you could break me, use me to feed your cursed line. But you were wrong. The curse doesn't control me. I control it." Alaric stumbled, his back hitting the cold stone wall. His heart raced as he felt the air around him tighten, as though the walls themselves were closing in. Elowen raised her hand, and the room seemed to tremble with her power. "Now, my prince, it's your turn to feel what I felt." With a flick of her wrist, the bed that had been her prison for 7 nights began to crumble. The mattresses collapsed, revealing the small, insignificant pea at their core. But as it rolled across the floor, its surface cracked, and a thick, black smoke began to seep from within. The pea wasn't just a test of sensitivity. It was a living curse, an ancient entity that fed on the pain of others. And now it was free. The smoke enveloped Alaric, its tendrils wrapping around him, squeezing tighter and tighter. His screams echoed through the castle as the curse claimed him, feeding on his torment just as it had fed on the princesses before him. Elowen watched, her smile never wavering. When the smoke finally cleared, nothing was left of Prince Alaric but a pile of dust. Elowen turned to leave, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. But as she reached the door, she paused, her eyes flickering back to the room where the cursed pea still lay. The curse had been broken, but Elowen knew that this was only the beginning. For now she carried the darkness within her, and she would carry it to the next kingdom she visited. The kingdom mourned the loss of their prince, but no one spoke of the strange woman who had vanished from the castle on the night of his death. Whispers of the cursed pea and the haunted bed spread like wildfire, but no one dared approach the castle, now abandoned and overrun by dark magic. And somewhere, far from the cursed kingdom, a new court welcomed a mysterious princess, one with a regal bearing and an unsettling smile. Thank you for joining us in the world of Twilight Fables. If you enjoyed this tale and want to hear more stories like this, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more.